Saints first round pick is in. Bryan Bresee, defensive tackle from Clemson. We're going to go ahead and talk about the pick. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the first round as far as where the Saints were and all that stuff. And we're going to do that with the backdrop of our guy, T-Bob, and Ross Jackson here. So this is Off the Bench, Overtime, ESPN 104.5. Before we get to the video, let me say this real quick. I like the pick. Okay, I think it was a safe pick. I think it was the most obvious pick. I think it was what Dennis Allen was going to do basically the whole time. I have no issues with it. I like it, right? Like, I think it's obvious. It fills a need. Apparently, it's a good player. Digging into who Bryan Bresee is or his history looks pretty solid. He's a guy who was the #1 recruit coming out of high school, went to Clemson. So he has a super, super strong pedigree. Tore his ACL in 2021, had a shoulder issue, had a kidney infection or something. He also dealt with some off-field tragedy. His sister died of brain cancer. So, I mean, this is one of those guys where he's not a household name. He was certainly highly recruited. He has certainly been through a lot. You absolutely cannot deny his mental fortitude and his physical characteristics. The guy's a freak athlete at the combine. I think he has a 28-rep bench press. Runs like a 4.9 40. You can play every position on the D-line. So love it, right? It makes total sense. Now, what I don't want to get into, and I think you'll hear a lot of people do this, especially a lot of Saints people, is you'll hear a bunch of like, this is the guy, this is a game changer, this is a Super Bowl foundation, this is who I wanted, this is who I had circled on the draft board. I think anyone telling you that is being disingenuous. I think anyone saying anything like that is, unless they are in the front office, unless they are actually doing scouting for the draft, for the Saints, there's no possible way they know any more about Bryan Bresee than me or you, okay? And he plays a position that I think is hard to judge. I think offensive line is hard to judge. I think these kind of guys, if they have the physical characteristics and the mental characteristics, it's up to the team to make them really, really good. Now, I kind of want to show y'all before we get into the video what I'm talking about here. If you look at the Pro Football Focus interior defensive lineman grades for last year, the fourth best in the NFL, according to them, is Deshaun Williams. All right, how many of y'all know who Deshaun Williams is? He plays for the Panthers. Would any of y'all say the fourth best defensive tackle in the NFL was that much of a game changer for the Panthers, who were absolutely ass? Okay. Then if I ask you, what's the difference between the fourth best defensive lineman in Deshaun Williams and the 20th defensive lineman in Aleem McNeil for the Lions? Would you even know? Do you know who Aleem McNeil is? Do you know who John Jenkins is? Do you know who Christian Barmore, T.R. Tart, Mike Purcell? So my whole point with this is that it's a position where all of this, I think people fall into a trap of talking about every player, every position like they're a quarterback or like they're a running back. And I hope that they don't do this in this video. So I just want to, if you're here for me to do a deep dive into Bryan Bresee and his game tape or his highlight reel or stuff like that, we're not going to do that. There's no point in doing that. I think the more constructive way to do it is, did the Saints make a smart pick as far as the board and as far as their needs? I would say yes. I thought the only other options would have been Nolan Smith, Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama. And because Michael Mayer fell, I thought they could have looked at it and said, well, we don't really need this, but he is a weapon. He is a talent. Do we just take the best player on the board? I'm glad we dodged Will Levis. I don't think they expected Will Levis. I know they didn't expect Will Levis to be there. So I'm sure there was a conversation like, what do we do? But they didn't even host, like they didn't even talk to Levis. They had no meetings with Levis. So I don't think that was ever going to happen. But great job there, dodging Levis, dodging Hooker. Smith, I'm cool with Bresee. Maybe, gun to my head, I would have rather Nolan Smith, but it's 1A, 1B.
General draft thoughts from last night, Ross. But first, I want to highlight Saints. You talk about the Saints every single day in depth. I can't fathom how much you've talked about Bryan Bresee up to this point already. What more? Give us the summary of all the conversations you've had over the past month. Why should Saints fans be so excited? Bresee, was this the right pick?
Yeah, I've had at least one Bryan Bresee segment in every week of the show for the last 2 months. And part of that.
Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine? I know it's part of the gig. You know, Ross Jackson covers the Saints exclusively. We kind of mix and match here. We're obviously like 80-20 Pelican Saints and then the rest of sports. But man, there's no way. I just don't think I could do it. I don't think I could sit here and talk about like Bryan Bresee for 2 months. You know, I just couldn't. No way I could do it.
And part of that is just because it seemed very likely that Bryan Bresee was going to be on the Saints' radar, if nothing else. And I'll tell you, like, some of the things that you can quickly highlight about him. Obviously, a lot of his story is going to center around his adversity or the adversity that he's faced, and his ability to be able to come out on the other side of it. I don't want to reprise trauma and things like that, like over and over again on the airwaves for the guy. But I will say that speaking to him last night after the draft, you could just see somebody that came out on the other side of things that would challenge any human being as a not so hardened but very matured man.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It is weird to talk about tragedy and stuff like that, and then to say like, it's kind of icky to be like, that absolutely horrible thing you wouldn't wish on any person in the whole world is good because it helps my football team. Like that feels gross, and I feel like that, so I 100% get what Ross is saying. With that being said, who he is, you gotta love the fact that he is a guy who went through adversity, even just the injuries. Even if you take away his sister's medical condition and all that stuff, if you just look at the torn ACL and all that, and then he's still able to perform physically like this, that is what the makeup you want in a guy, the makeup you want in a player. This is like the opposite of off-field issues. And like I talked about earlier with his athleticism, the 28 rep bench press and the 40, I don't think you can have a foundation any better for the position and for what the Saints need than Bryan Bresee, right? Will he become the best defensive tackle in the NFL? Who knows? Will he be a top 10 defensive tackle? I don't know. But I do know is that from what it looks like, it's hard to argue that the Saints didn't make a very smart pick here.
And I think that that's one of the things that the New Orleans Saints absolutely love about Bryan Bresee. He's an attacking 3-tech style interior defensive lineman with experience who has played up and down the defensive line in heavy rotations, in 3-man fronts, odd man fronts, 3-man fronts, 4-man fronts, bear fronts, Okie fronts. He's done it all. But one of the things that is kind of a main cornerstone criterion for the New Orleans Saints is makeup. And this guy is made of the best. And so it was a very exciting to get to see him and speak with him last night, in a night that was so very exciting for him. But it's clear to see where he'll translate on the field as well.
So now, Ross, we kind of talked about it with Jake, but I mean, you could go a lot of different ways here for it. We know the Saints, if they have a guy that they are going to trade up, Mickey Loomis, whatever, we all know that. Michael Mayer is still out there.
Not only Mayer, but I mean, Brian Branch, who I brought up, there's still, I mean, he's got some issues, but like Joey Porter Jr., defensive back, there are players out there that, from what I've heard in the inner circles, the top of the second round is better, basically deeper than the middle of the first. So if the Saints want to attack, that's where they need to attack. If they want to move up, they want to move up in that top half of the second round, get as many picks as they can up in there, and start picking off these Michael Mayers and Brian Branches and whoever else. There is some serious talent out there right now, and a lot of that talent fills a lot of what the Saints need to do. So this 29, I think, is exciting. A first-round pick is always exciting. I think we got a good first-round pick. But to me, what the Saints do in the next couple of hours, I mean, I'm filming this at noon on a Friday. What the Saints do in the next couple of days, or 24 to 48 hours, that is more exciting to me than the first round.
Now, am I guilty of just falling into the old easy, like, ooh, offensive piece, let's go? Like, would you trade up to get Michael Mayer here early in this second?
I don't think you trade up. No, I think this is a fallacy too, because I don't think you trade assets to get a guy that you passed on, if that makes sense. Like, unless, I mean, it would have to be a very specific situation, but I think the Saints, if he's there again, maybe, but I don't think you turn him down and then turn around and trade up to go get him today.
Yeah, it's interesting. Dennis Allen said that when the Cincinnati Bengals went up on the clock last night, that there were still two guys that were there that they felt like, okay, no matter what, we're going to get one of the guys. And Bryan Bresee was one of those guys. And so they were able to go with him at 29. But there is a chance that Myles Murphy, who was taken at 28 by the Cincinnati Bengals, was the other guy. But there's also a chance that he wasn't. And there's a good chance that Felix Anudike-Uzomah, as well as Nolan Smith, the two edge rushers.
I think it had to be Nolan Smith. I mean, Nolan Smith had a grade of like a top 15 pick. The fact that the Eagles walked out with him and Jalen Carter is absolutely insane. But I think it had to be Nolan Smith. The fact that he's there that late and with that kind of a pedigree and that kind of a grade, I mean, that's why I said I have no problem with Bresee, but I would have had to do a real hard double take at Nolan Smith.
That were taken after.
If someone would have taken him 14th overall, no one would have batted an eye.
After Bryan Bresee weren't those guys either, considering they don't really check the boxes in terms of the prototype. They're undersized edge rushers at the next level, at the Saints' next level in terms of their system. And so if a guy like Michael Mayer was the other target that could have potentially fallen, well, he's still on the board going into this second round. And I think that adding an offensive weapon next is something that would benefit the New Orleans Saints. I think going to their offensive line would benefit them as well. A guy like Osiris Torrance out of Florida, or, of course, formerly of the Raging Cajuns, who hasn't allowed a sack in his entire career. Steve Avila out of TCU is another kind of road grader offensive lineman that they could go with. So they have the ability to continue to address their trenches, but I wouldn't rule out the opportunity and the idea here for an offensive weapon. And I look at guys like Michael Mayer, of course, Darnell Washington, the big tight end / almost offensive lineman, that guy out of Georgia. And then also another guy that I'll point out would be Cedric Tillman, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, or Jalen Hyatt, the wide receivers out of Tennessee for that matter, because of the connection to Cody Burns, the New Orleans Saints wide receiver coach, formerly with the Tennessee Volunteers.
We're talking to Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, host of the Locked On Saints podcast.
Yeah, the Saints have a lot of options, but they're in a great spot. They were in a great spot last night, tons of options, and that continues today.
Ross, I asked Jake the same question hour one. The Carolina Panthers get Bryce Young, number 1 overall. No surprise there. It kind of became clear the past week. How worried should New Orleans Saints fans be about the Panthers going forward?
Not worried at all. I mean, like, I've actually heard a lot of this kind of talk from a lot of different teams. I heard something about the AFC South where they were talking about, like, if you are, which is kind of funny to think about now looking back, but I think it was the Titans. It might have been the Titans, but it was like, if you're the Titans, are you worried that Indianapolis could get Will Levis? Should you trade up to get Will Levis? What an insane line of thinking, right? Like, you're worried about another team getting a player that you may not even necessarily want. So you go get them just so the other team doesn't have them. And then it turns out Will Levis doesn't even get taken in the first round. Like, imagine if that conversation is happening in the front office of the Tennessee Titans. Like, hey, guys, should we trade up to 4 so that the Colts don't get Levis and we take him? And then all of a sudden, it's just insane to think about. How many quarterbacks are bust? How many players are bust? Tons. How many people are average? Like, you can't worry about the Panthers having Bryce Young. It's the same thing as, like, I mean, were the Saints worried when the Panthers had Cam Newton? Were the Saints worried when the Falcons had MVP level Matt Ryan? Were the Saints worried when Tom Brady was in Tampa Bay? I don't think that you could say they were worried. I think you could say, like, all right, we have to game plan for this. There's going to be good players. There's going to be bad players. There's going to be roster turnover. It's your job, I think, as a front office, is to make your team the best team possible and to run the division, to run the conference. You can't worry about how good another team is. You should be worried about making your team better. The Panthers should be worried about you. It's nuts to me to think about, are the Saints worried about the Atlanta Falcons now that the Atlanta Falcons have Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson and Drake London? It's like, who who knows? The Saints should be worried about filling out their own roster. Like that's just such a wild line of thinking.
Yeah, I think you're at least a little worried about the fact that there's another mobile quarterback in the division, and we know that hasn't necessarily been the Saints' defense's.
Who gives a shit? PJ Tucker. Wasn't the Panthers quarterback PJ Walker? PJ Walker. He was a mobile quarterback. PJ Walker sucked. Like how good is Bryce Young going to be? Is he going to be better than PJ Walker? I don't know. Is he going to be better than Desmond Ridder? I don't know. Is he going to be better than Marcus Mariota? I don't know. Marcus Mariota was a mobile quarterback. The Panthers beat the Saints last year with who was even the quarterback? Was it Sam Darnold? Who the hell was the quarterback last year when they walked in here and beat the Saints in the last game of the season? I think it was Sam Darnold, because I think he threw for like 80 yards in a win. But like, who cares? Were they worried about Sam Darnold? They should have been, because they lost at home. Were they worried about Marcus? Were they worried about Daniel Jones? Like all these bad quarterbacks who beat the Saints. Like it's crazy to me to be like, man, Bryce Young's getting a lot of love in the media. We should be worried about that cat. New Orleans, y'all should be worried about everybody. Win games.
Strength, although it hasn't been as big of a weakness in the recent years as we look back to, let's say, the RG3 days and things like that, right? You're so far away, so long ago. And so I think that, you look at the mobile quarterback side of it, you look at the dual quarterback side, the dual threat side of it all. He's also highly accurate. He's incredibly athletic. I mean, he's a smart processor, quick.
Let me say this too about Bryce Young. If you think Bryce Young is going to be some dual threat run around quarterback, I got news for you. He ain't. He's 5'10", 180 pounds. All right. If he's a dual threat quarterback, he will be out of the NFL within 3 years. There is no way in hell this dude's going to be designed running or scrambling or running around. I mean, he may do it every once in a while. Tom Brady does it every once in a while. But Bryce Young will not be a dual. He will not be Justin Fields.
Processor. He's a very good quarterback. So I think in any case, you're a little bit worried about that. How well does he translate to the NFL game? How well can the Carolina Panthers build around him, who have gotten at least off to a very good start in terms of their coaching situation? Like Bryce Young enters one of the best quarterback coaching systems out there in the NFL. And so I think that that's something maybe to be concerned about. But look, the Saints have a lot of experience creating an offensive attack to support an undersized quarterback, just in terms of height. When it came to Drew Brees, there's always that question about
we are down a rabbit hole here. That what
Drew Brees being shorter than his offensive line, all those other things. So they're incredibly well positioned and versed in what it takes to disrupt the game of a.
So the line of thinking here is that because the Saints were good with Drew Brees, they know what it would take to stop an undersized quarterback. I wonder if you could do, like, I don't have the database, but if you had the database, I wonder if you could show, like, what's the Saints record against starting quarterbacks smaller than Drew Brees? What's the Saints passing yards given up per game to quarterbacks smaller than Drew Brees? Like, this is one of those things where it sounds like okay, like it sounds like it makes sense, but then who the hell knows? Who knows?
Smaller passer, and a 5'10" Bryce Young is a guy that you would be able to get after that. Now you add a 6'5" interior defensive lineman, and we know that the New Orleans Saints love their defensive linemen tall, 6'4" and above. That puts them in a pretty good position now, especially with the addition of Bryan Bresee, who's a great interior pass rusher, can put pressure right in the face of Bryce Young off the line of scrimmage and right up the middle of the offensive line. So they should have the pieces that they need to be able to counteract sort of what Bryce Young is. But either way, I mean, he's an incredibly talented quarterback. And the big question is, how can Carolina build around him as they move forward?
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that. I kind of love that, though, in a lot of ways. It is some sort of slight counterpunch to Bryce Young.
I'm getting fired up. Any defensive lineman, I mean, like the idea that, the Panthers take Bryce Young, and then the Saints go, wait a minute, guys. I know how we can counter Bryce Young because he's 5'10". Let's draft a taller interior defensive lineman. Then he'll bat the balls down. Like, there's no way that's the conversation. No chance. By the way, this is Bryce Young last year. I in my mind, I thought I knew the answer. But isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how it's like Bryce Young, dual threat, mobile quarterback? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I don't remember Bryce Young really running around that much. I don't remember Bryce Young really being a mobile dual threat quarterback. And you look at these stats from last year, Bryce Young ran the ball 46 times for 195 yards, averaging 4.2 yards a rush for 4 touchdowns over the course of the entire season. Look at these games. 3 attempts for negative 10 yards against Kansas State, 5 for 48, 4 for negative 10, 7 for 10, 4 for 10. I mean, he only had really 1 positive game running, and it says 5 attempts for 100 yards, but he also had a 63-yard run against Utah State. So Bryce Young isn't even a mobile quarterback. Like Bryce, like look, this is his Heisman year right here. This is the year he wins the Heisman, right? Oh wait, this is the year he won the Heisman. I mean, look at this. He had 31 rushes for 0.4 yard average. Like, what in the world are we talking about? This, I love it. I really do. I think it's so funny how people just toss stuff. And that's what I'm saying with this whole, like, the height of Bresee. And, like, people just throw stuff out there. And nothing against, T-Bob or Ross Jackson. Nothing against them. But I think this, when you're so wrapped up in the draft stuff and you're so wrapped up in this, like, player grading and, trying to forecast how players are going to be, the fact that you could look at Bryce Young and you could be like, I don't know. I mean, he's a mobile dual threat guy. He's going to be running around. He's going to be, the Panthers. The Saints got to be ready to deal with this dual threat. He might as well be Matt Ryan. He might as well be Joe Flacco. I mean, I cannot get over this. I am blown away at these stats. Again, I knew when I went to search this, I knew what I was going to see, but I didn't think it was this bad. He did not have a rush of more than 20 yards, of more than 16 yards to be exact, in his Heisman winning year. And we're talking about how the Saints are going to counterpunch this dual threat quarterback. I mean, it's crazy, ladies and gentlemen.
Z represents specifically. Ross, have you ever played Settlers of Catan, the board game?
Yes, a long time ago,
Okay. Well,
and for a long time, because that's what. Yeah.
The point is, I'm sorry, I've stepped all over that. I screwed you. But
you're good.
Look, it's awesome. It's so much fun, but it causes massive arguments, right, amongst the friends, and mainly the arguments are based off of what people call king making, where you make a bad trade and you set somebody else up to win the game. Well, the king-making legacy of the New Orleans Saints continued last night as the Philadelphia Eagles got Jalen Carter at 9. Ross, how's anybody supposed to compete with this Eagles team? Like, is there...
Real quick, I'll talk about this. The Eagles are how you do a draft. The fact that they got Carter, first of all, the Bears, what the hell are y'all doing? Talk about a bad trade. Was the Bears moving back 1 spot for a 4th-round pick to give up Carter? But the Eagles getting Carter and Smith is unbelievable. I mean, unreal. And I tweeted this out, but the Texans, when they had 2 and 3, I thought what they should do, especially with D'Amico Ryans coming in, is set the tone, address what he's known for, and get Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. And if the Texans would have walked out of that with Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, and then they could turn around and get like a Hendon Hooker or a Will Levis, can you imagine if the Texans, in their first 3 picks, they go Anderson, Carter, Hendon Hooker? You don't think the Texans fan base would be losing their mind? Now, you could sit here and say, like, well, the Texans didn't know the quarterbacks would drop. No doubt. But even take away that 3rd pick. Even take away that. Just being able to say, we've got D'Amico Ryans. Look what he did in San Francisco. And then we're walking in here with Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. That right there is how you do it. And the Philadelphia Eagles, the fact that they got Jordan Davis, the fact that they got now they have Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, and then the cornerback too from their draft last year. I mean, that's how you do it. It shows a good front office, good ownership, a head coach that knows what he's doing. I mean, the the Eagles won the draft as far as I'm concerned. And it's hard to, I mean, you know, obviously I want the Saints to be good, but it's hard for me to imagine someone's going to compete with the Philadelphia Eagles. But we'll stop the video there now that we're getting away from the original topic here of the Saints first round pick. So that's my video. That's my review of the Saints first round pick. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think about the first round pick? Did you like it? Is there someone else you would have rather got? Do you think the Saints should have traded up, traded down? What's your thoughts there? And be nice, guys. Be nice to Ross and T-Bob. I know I kind of went off there on the Bryce Young dual threat quarterback stuff, but I can't help it sometimes. We are miles ahead of everyone else in the space. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.